Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my channel? Thank you so much. 5 years of unrequited love were like bitter melon mixed with lemon juice, both sour and bitter. I finally lost my mind and, fueled by alcohol, pushed Daniel down. The next day, when I sobered up and saw the disgust in his eyes, I felt as cold as if I had fallen into an ice cellar. I thought he would leave me, but instead he silently took my hand and we got our marriage certificate. Before I could even recover from my ecstasy, he turned and boarded a flight to America. I clutched the red certificate tightly, watching the plane disappear into the clouds. His last words to me echoed in my mind. "Congratulations on getting what you wanted." His tone was calm, his eyes dark and deep like the cold night. No one could have imagined that in just one night, I would become pregnant. I told him the news, and he only replied with one word. "Oh." I didn't dare to go to him, afraid of seeing the disgust in his eyes. I gave birth to my son, Alexander, alone, hoping he would come back soon. Alexander is 3 years old and looks just like Daniel. He keeps asking me why his dad doesn't come back. Does he not like him? I have no choice but to repeat the lie over and over again. Finally, Daniel came back. I dropped my important work and rushed to the airport with Alexander in my arms. In a daze, I saw the boy from 8 years ago walking towards me. My head was spinning, my eyes were burning, but I was smiling. I pushed my son forward. "Say hello to Daddy." His son's face flushed with excitement as he rushed over and hugged his father's leg, calling out, "Daddy, Daddy." "Alexander missed you so much," I said. Daniel remained calm and subtly avoided his son's embrace. "I'm sorry, I have a bit of a cold," he said. My heart sank instantly. I don't care how much I suffer, but seeing the tears in my son's eyes made my heart ache like it was being stabbed with needles. "Daniel, Uncle Daniel." Two voices rang out, and a young woman approached, leading a little boy. The woman smiled gently. "Daniel, you're finally back." Daniel bent down, picked up the little boy, and affectionately bumped foreheads with him. His eyes, however, were fixed on the woman. "Yes, I'm back." Their attitude towards me and Alexander was completely different from before. It looked like a family of three. Alexander stared blankly at them, tears streaming down his face. When I was 7, my parents died in an accident, and my father's good friend, Uncle Caleb, and his family kindly took me in. Uncle Caleb's son, Daniel, had just completed his application to study in the United States. He was gone for 10 years, and we only saw him a few times during that time, occasionally greeting him via video through Uncle Caleb and his wife. He returned to China 5 years ago. He emerged from the airport wearing an incredibly simple white shirt and khaki suit trousers that accentuated his impossibly long legs. The bright sunlight bathed him, making even the strands of his hair seem to glow. I was frozen in place, staring blankly as he approached. He looked down, tugged at my braid, and said, "Bonnie, you've grown up." In that instant, my breath caught in my throat. The world seemed incredibly beautiful to me. I fell madly in love with him, irrationally so. A young girl's passion was impossible to hide, and he began to avoid me. I cried and asked him, "Why can't we?" "Bonnie, you're my sister," he replied, his voice as cold as ever. "But we're not related by blood, and I wasn't adopted by your family." I stubbornly grabbed his hand. He gently brushed my fingers away, but a strange emotion flashed in his eyes. At my 20th birthday party, we all drank a lot of alcohol, and my head was spinning. Daniel handed me a glass of water, which I took and then smashed on the floor with a bang. While he was still in shock, I pushed him down and kissed him passionately. His initial resistance turned into fiery passion. The madness of that night is indescribable. In the early morning, I stared at his handsome face, smiling foolishly. Daniel opened his eyes, and I froze. His eyes were icy. "Let's go," he said, getting dressed and putting his hands in his pockets. "Where to?" I asked. "Get the marriage certificate." His voice was as cold as ice. "Bonnie, if this is what you want, then I'll grant your wish." I followed him to the Civil Affairs Bureau in a daze and only came to my senses when I received the marriage certificate. I wanted to explain to him that I wasn't just after the certificate. I truly loved him. But he abandoned me as soon as he left the Civil Affairs Bureau. I've been searching everywhere for him until his best friend told me that Daniel was drunk and said he had made an irreparable mistake and didn't want to see me again. But I was pregnant. The thought that this child was Daniel's made me love him from the bottom of my heart. 3 years have passed, and he's finally back, but he no longer belongs to us. The woman's name is Caroline, his ex-girlfriend. After we got married, Caroline quickly got married and had a child. I didn't know they had been seeing each other, and Daniel only returned to his country because of Caroline. So what are Alexander and I, Mom? Why isn't Dad coming home with us? Alexander asked, wiping away tears and looking longingly at the 3 people walking ahead, so loving and affectionate. I was speechless. After thinking for a moment, I texted Daniel, "Will you come home? Your son misses you." Daniel paused, glanced at his phone, then casually put it down again. At that moment, I finally gave up. Late at night, I finally managed to coax a heartbroken Alexander to sleep when the villa door suddenly opened. I jumped out of bed and watched Daniel's tall figure approach. Wasn't he going to Caroline's? He glanced at his sleeping son, his eyes darkening slightly. Alexander looked so much like him. If he had eyes, he couldn't possibly remain indifferent. Hope rekindled in my heart. Daniel, he looked at me, his tone as cold as ever. Don't overthink it. This is my home. Of course, I'm coming back. My Uncle Caleb and his wife have long since traveled the world, and I'm managing the business now. It's all right as long as Daniel comes back, as long as our son can see him. However, his next words extinguished my hopes. It's George's birthday in a couple of days, and I'd like to throw him a party at home. George is Caroline's son. I was stunned, suppressing my anger. I asked him, "Have you considered Alexander's feelings? He's never seen his father since birth. You won't even hold him, and now you're throwing a birthday party for another child at his house. How do you expect Alexander to feel?" Daniel looked at me coldly and said, "If you hadn't raised him to be so stingy, this wouldn't be a problem at all." My heart ached. Had I raised Alexander to be so stingy? Children without fathers are prone to insecurity, and I could only try to be more loving and tolerant towards him. Was that wrong? For my son's sake, I refused to back down any further. "I disagree," Daniel scoffed. "Bonnie, I'm the head of this household. I'm just informing you, not asking for your opinion." His contemptuous tone pierced my heart. I gave a cold laugh and said, "Don't forget we're still husband and wife, and I'm the lady of the house." A flash of surprise crossed Daniel's eyes. He clearly hadn't expected me to talk back to him. After a few seconds of silence, he said calmly, "It's been years, and I almost forgot what kind of person you are. You should have expected this outcome when you schemed to break me up with Caroline back then." I gave a bitter smile. "Daniel, weren't you the one who was so passionate and demanding of me that night? The mistake was made by both of us, but I have to bear the consequences alone." Alexander frowned slightly and gave an uneasy hum. Afraid of waking him, I lowered my voice and said, "Let's talk outside." "No need," Daniel said casually, glancing at Alexander. "There's nothing to talk about between us. I promised George I'd throw him a party at home. In exchange, I'll accompany you to the family activity next week." My heart ached. He's Alexander's father. This seemingly normal thing felt like a blessing. Thinking about how Alexander had been counting down the days, eagerly anticipating his father taking him to kindergarten, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I nodded. "Okay, I'll take Alexander out. And remember what you said." Early in the morning, Alexander found his father home and excitedly ran over to hug him, looking up at him and shouting, "Daddy, you're back. Take me to kindergarten." Daniel frowned slightly, but didn't push him away. I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. "Dad has something to do. Mom will take you." Daniel got up and walked to the door, then looked back at us and said, "George is transferring to a new kindergarten today. I need to take care of the paperwork for him." He paused and then added, "It's the kindergarten Alexander attends. Hungwo Kindergarten is one of the top kindergartens in the city and even the country. Some parents bring tents and queue for days at the gate just to get their children in. I also went to great lengths to get Alexander admitted." Daniel, on the other hand, had already used his connection. To get everything done before returning to China, my heart ached with bitterness. I couldn't help but yell at him. "Daniel, Who's your son anyway? Your heart is completely biased. Daniel's phone rang, and he answered it while walking. Don't worry, I'll be right there. Everything's taken care of. Don't worry. George, have you eaten breakfast properly? Your uncle has arranged everything for your birthday party and even prepared your present. As I watched his figure recede into the distance, I felt suffocated. Mom, whose birthday is Dad going to celebrate? Alexander gently shook my hand, tears welling up in his eyes. I knelt down and hugged my son. This marriage had no reason to continue. I made a mistake back then, so cutting my losses now was the right thing to do. I could never love this man again. After dropping Alexander off at kindergarten, I called and made an appointment with my lawyer to draft the divorce papers. Once the parent-child activity was over, Daniel and I went to complete the paperwork. In the afternoon, I was negotiating an important contract, so I asked my assistant to pick up Alexander. Shortly after, my assistant sent me a photo. Daniel held George in his arms, with Caroline nestled beside him. What a loving family. Bonnie, I saw Daniel. He seems to know this mother and son very well. I gripped my phone tightly, my knuckles turning white. When we got home, Alexander was sitting alone, his eyes red-rimmed. I couldn't bear to ask him anything. Alexander, being a child, wiped away his tears and asked, Mommy, I saw Daddy at kindergarten. I called him, but he didn't answer me. George even accused me of stealing his father, but he's clearly my father. So how did he become George's? I was speechless. I wanted to give the company back to him and then disappear from his life completely. Alexander shouldn't have to bear the consequences of my mistakes. I carefully chose my words and said, George is wrong. He is your father. We're going to parent-child activity together next week. Alexander was then happy. Late at night, Daniel returned home and didn't seem surprised to see me waiting for him in the living room. Before I could speak, he said, Take Alexander out tomorrow and come back in the evening. I gave a wry smile. Daniel, to celebrate someone else's child's birthday, you kicked your own son out of the house. What kind of heart do you have? Daniel frowned. There's no point in you dwelling on this. My decision won't change. I swallowed the tears that almost spilled from my eyes and nodded. As you wish. We won't show up tomorrow, but please keep your promise to Alexander. Don't worry. He seemed uninterested in saying another word to me and turned to go into his room. I sat there in the empty living room, lost in thought. If time could turn back, I would absolutely never make that foolish mistake again. But alas, there are no ifs in this world, only consequences. Daniel went out early in the morning. Alexander didn't see his father and couldn't hide his disappointment. And seeing at my expression, he didn't say a word and obediently went to eat. Such a young child, and he's already learned to read people's expressions. My child, I wish you weren't so sensible. Alexander, shall we go hiking today? It's the weekend, so we don't have to go to kindergarten. Then can Daddy come too? Alexander asked hesitantly. Well, Dad has something to do, so it's just Mom and Alexander. After we climb the mountain, we'll go see a movie. Your favorite, Transformers. Don't you like Bumblebee the most? Okay. I watched the light in my son's eyes slowly dim, and I couldn't help but feel heartbroken. I had just driven out of the gate when I saw a van from a creative arts company pull up. Through the window, I could see a riot of colors. Daniel really put his heart into it, setting everything up so early. I turned my head and looked at Alexander, who was sitting obediently in his child's safety seat, and felt a pang of pain in my heart. We went hiking, watched a movie, and had a family meal. Mommy, Alexander is sleepy and wants to go to bed, Alexander said, yawning. After a day of fun, not only the child, but I was exhausted too. Looking at the time, it was already 8 o'clock. The party should be over by now. I took Alexander home. From afar, I could see the villa brightly lit and faintly hear laughter and chatter. Just how grand was this birthday party? I hesitated. Should I wait a little longer? Alexander was almost asleep in his car's seat, his little head nodding. I gritted my teeth and drove home. Lights and toys were set up on the lawn. The gate was ajar, and the house was brightly lit with singing and laughter. Alexander's eyes widened in surprise. Mom, he exclaimed, has a thief broken into our house? I stopped in my tracks. Yes, a thief had broken in, but Daniel had hired him. I took Alexander's hand, walked up the steps, and pushed open the door. A room full of guests turned to look at us. I didn't recognize most of them. They were all friends of Daniel and Caroline. George, dressed in a bespoke suit and wearing a birthday hat, sat in Daniel's lap, beaming. He held a giant bumblebee toy, Alexander's favorite. The living room was filled with balloons and ribbons, and gifts were piled high. In the very center was a large cake, taller than a person. It read, "Happy Birthday, George," and it was signed by his mother, Caroline, and his father, Daniel. My head buzzed, and all the blood rushed to my head. A voice kept repeating in my mind, "Bonnie, this place no longer belongs to you. Leave." 3 years ago, I was accepted into London Business School, but I gave it up to marry Daniel. Now, for Alexander and for myself, I'm going back to my own world. Alexander glanced at the large cake, pointed at George in Daniel's arms, and shouted, "Why are you in my house?" Daniel's face darkened, and he snapped, "How can you be so rude? Apologize to George." George immediately perked up and said dismissively, "This is my home. My dad celebrated my birthday here." Alexander clenched his little fists and shouted, "You're talking nonsense. This is my home, and it's my dad." I stepped forward and took my son's hand. "Alexander, let's go to bed." Caroline, who had been silent until now, suddenly laughed and said, "Bonnie, the kids are just playing around. Don't get angry." As she spoke, she reached out to touch Alexander's head. I pushed her hand away and gave her a cold look. Alexander pointed at George. "Give me back Bumblebee." "No way." "Oh, this kid's a bit stingy," Caroline said with a sarcastic smile. Daniel rolled his eyes at me. "This is the kind of kid you raised." I was speechless. Does generosity mean giving away a child's favorite thing? Alexander gritted his teeth, trying to snatch back his beloved toy. Daniel pushed him away. Alexander tripped and fell, hitting his forehead on a coffee table base, raising a large bump. "Daniel, you're insane." I rushed over and picked Alexander up, my heart breaking when I saw the blood seeping from his forehead. "Daniel, are you even human? He's your own son. How could you do this?" Caroline leaned closer. "Oh dear, Daniel, why are you so angry?" "George, give the toy back to Alexander." "No way." George stomped his foot. "Bumblebee is mine." Daniel watched coldly. "I don't want to see these people anymore. I need to treat Alexander's wounds." "Alexander, come back to your room with Mom." Alexander stubbornly refused to leave. "How petty of you." Caroline snorted and nudged George. "Give it back to him." George suddenly slammed Bumblebee to the ground and stomped on it. "I won't give it to him. I won't give it to him." Alexander lunged to grab it, but I couldn't stop him, and his hand was stomped on until it bled. He couldn't hold back any longer and burst into tears. The guests exchanged bewildered glances. Tears welled in my eyes as I picked up Alexander and carried him upstairs. I was so wrong. I shouldn't have gotten entangled with them. I'll get far away from them now. The banquet downstairs finally ended. Daniel pushed open the door. "How's Alexander?" I didn't even lift my eyelids and said calmly, "He's asleep after the medication." There was silence for a while, and I thought he had left when suddenly I heard a voice say, "I'm sorry." My throat tightened. So he knew everything but chose to ignore it. I deserved to be hurt, but what did Alexander do wrong to deserve this? Daniel handed me a jewelry box. What I did today was ill-considered. "This is for you." I glanced at it. It contained pearl earrings, a somewhat outdated style. I'm allergic to pearls and never touch them. "Thank you." I stood up. "It's getting late. I need a rest." "You can go now." "You don't like it?" "No, I don't have pierced ears." Caroline likes to wear earrings, probably. Daniel gave them to her, but the style was old-fashioned and she didn't like them, so she gave them to me. He didn't know I was allergic to pearls, nor did he know I didn't even have pierced ears. So how could I wear earrings? Daniel paused, then reached out to touch my earlobe. I took a step back. "It's late. Don't wake the child." Daniel lowered his hand, his lips twitching almost imperceptibly. I watched him silently. I shifted my gaze to the doorway. Daniel finally left. I turned on my computer and opened a reply email from London Business School. The offer letter was still valid, and they welcomed me to enroll at any time. I breathed a huge sigh of relief. Goodbye, Daniel. No, never again. The kindergarten's parent-child activity finally started. Games, performances. It was a lively affair. I couldn't find Daniel in the crowd. He had promised me, "Mommy, Daddy will definitely come, right?" Alexander asked me again, looking into his hopeful eyes. I couldn't suppress my resentment towards Daniel any longer. Suddenly, Alexander pointed to the stage and shouted, "It's Dad." I was startled and looked up to see Daniel and Caroline, each holding one of George's hands as they jumped around on stage. There were many intersecting patterns on the ground, and music would play whenever someone stepped on one. Daniel was tall and long-legged, walking with a brisk pace. The music blared, eliciting cheers. Caroline smiled radiantly, and George was overjoyed. Behind them, whispers arose, "That dad on stage is so handsome. I know this handsome guy. He's the chairman of a company. He picks up his son every day and dotes on his wife and son. I'm so envious." I stared blankly at the happy family of three on stage, speechless. The host announced the George family #1. He handed the microphone to Daniel. "George's dad, what do you value most?" Daniel hugged George and Caroline, his face full of tenderness and affection. "Of course, it's my wife and son." My heart was numb. I couldn't feel any pain. Alexander cried. Large tears streamed down his face. "Daddy really doesn't want us anymore. Alexander, we're not playing anymore. Mommy, let's go home." I knelt down, wiped away my son's tears, and said, "Okay." My hands gripping the steering wheel trembled uncontrollably. Was Daniel's heart really made of stone? Suddenly, my phone rang. I opened it and saw a message from an unknown number. "Bonnie, why did you leave?" Daniel said he'd come find you after we finished playing the game. "Why didn't you wait for him?" It was Caroline. I felt nauseous and immediately blocked her. My phone kept ringing. This time it was Daniel. I answered. "Bonnie, what are you doing?" "I promised to spend time with our son." "Why did you leave?" I gave a cold laugh. "Daniel, we don't need your charity." I had just hung up the phone when I heard Alexander's terrified voice. "Mommy, Mommy." I was startled, and a huge shadow loomed in front of me. I slammed on the brakes, but there was no response. A violent crash and a sharp sound followed, and the world spun around me. I lost consciousness. When I woke up again, I was in a hospital bed. "Alexander," I cried out in panic. "Where's my son? How is he? Where is he?" I grabbed the nurse and asked. "The little boy's condition is not good. He's still being resuscitated," the nurse said with pity. My mind was buzzing. I jumped out of bed and stumbled towards the operating room. "Alexander, you can't be hurt. It's all Mommy's fault. Don't punish Mommy." My throat was dry, unable to utter a sound. Only a desperate wail echoed in my heart. "Alexander, don't leave. Mommy, please. You've always been so good." The operating room doors opened, and a nurse rushed past. I watched helplessly as my Alexander was still being resuscitated. I was wrong, terribly wrong. Why did I answer that phone call? Why did I let them affect my emotions? The child lost too much blood, and his blood type is rare, Rh negative, also known as panda blood. The hospital's blood bank has run out of blood, and now we can only get some from other places. I don't know if it will be in time, the doctor said to me with a slight apology. My vision went black. In a hoarse voice, I said, "What do you mean if we can get a blood transfusion in time?" "There's still hope. Otherwise, it's hard to say. I'm not Rh negative, but Daniel is." My fingers trembled as I dialed his number. "Busy." I dialed again, but no one answered. I borrowed a nurse's phone and dialed again. This time it went through. "Daniel, Alexander is in the hospital. He's being treated. You need to come quickly." My throat was hoarse, and every word I uttered felt like it was bleeding. Caroline's voice came through the phone. "Bonnie, what did you say?" "We're at the beach. The waves are quite loud." I swallowed hard. "Give the phone to Daniel." Caroline raised her voice. "Daniel, Bonnie is looking for you." Hope rose in my heart. "What? You asked her what happened?" "She said Alexander is sick in the hospital and wants you to go see him." I was stunned. Caroline's voice was light and cheerful. "Daniel is teaching George to swim and doesn't have time. He'll go to the hospital when he's free." I yelled, "Tell him his son is dying. Wait for him to save him." The other party had already hung up. My son was still lying on the operating table, his life hanging in the balance. I couldn't give up. I wiped my dry eyes, straightened up, and started making calls. Yes, I need a helicopter immediately. Understood. Bonnie, I'll apply for the flight route right away. It's too late. Fly it first. I'll handle the flight route. I used all my connections and resources, exhausted every means, and tried every possible method. With the hospital's cooperation, the precious blood was finally delivered to the operating room. Ms. Bonnie, the surgery was a success, and the child is out of danger. I feel like all my strength has been drained. I kneel down and thank God. Alexander, thank you for forgiving your mother. Thank you for not abandoning her. 2 weeks later, Alexander recovered, and I took him on a plane to London. Before leaving, I mailed the divorce papers to Daniel. He didn't ask for anything except my shares. Caroline must be ecstatic. During those 2 weeks, Daniel didn't visit Alexander once or even make a single phone call. Upon arriving in London, I found a kindergarten and a nanny to care for Alexander and began my studies. All the memories of back home have faded away. People always make mistakes when they're young, but that's okay. I can start over. Daniel had been quite restless lately. The other day, the phone call with Bonnie suddenly dropped, and he vaguely heard a loud noise. When he called back, her phone was switched off. Caroline chuckled. Is she throwing a tantrum? You said you'd go be with her. Why is she like this? Daniel's eyes darkened. Yes, Bonnie had been lukewarm towards him these past few days. Was she playing hard to get? Actually, if she were willing to soften her stance and be more obedient to him, he wasn't unwilling to give her a chance. But she's so inconsiderate. Why can't she be as gentle and understanding as Caroline? Her behavior only annoys him. George hugged his leg. Daddy, you promised to teach me to swim. Let's go to the beach. Caroline frowned. George, stop fooling around. Daddy promised to go with Alexander. No, Daddy, go with me. Caroline sighed, looking helplessly at Daniel. Okay, let's go to the beach then, he agreed. He casually blacklisted her number. Bonnie, this is what happens when you throw a tantrum. He was teaching George to swim, but he seemed distracted. Caroline said that when Bonnie called him, he appeared impatient, but was secretly quite pleased with himself. It's common for children to get sick. If he just ignores her for a few more days and breaks her arrogance, she'll be obedient to him from now on. He can accept her and Alexander, although Alexander has been spoiled and pampered by her. He's still young, and he can teach him slowly. Later, they played at the beach until late, then went on a business trip the next day, which lasted for half a month. But Bonnie never called again, and there were no messages on Facebook or in her email. He couldn't help but call her, but her phone was switched off. He sent a message and saw the red exclamation mark, realizing she had deleted him. A wave of panic washed over him. Just as he got home, the maid handed him an envelope. A bad feeling washed over him, and his hands trembled as he opened it. Divorce papers. She actually wants a divorce. She was willing to do anything to have him back, and now she wanted a divorce. Daniel didn't even bother to read the terms before tearing the paper to shreds. Bonnie, do you think you could just want me, Daniel, and throw me away as you please? He rushed to the company, only to find out she had already resigned. Her assistant told him that Alexander had been injured in a car accident and Bonnie had taken him abroad. A car accident? Daniel recalled the sharp, piercing sound from the phone. The call had abruptly ended because they had been in a car accident. He broke out in a cold sweat. He rushed to the hospital, grabbed the doctors and nurses, and asked, were there any mother and child brought in from the car accident 2 weeks ago? How are they? The nurse glanced at him. This man looked really strange. He was impeccably dressed, but his expression was somewhat crazed. Yes, both of them were seriously injured when they were brought in, especially the child, who has Rh-negative blood. Our hospital has run out of plasma, and we couldn't get any from other places in time. Fortunately, that mother was incredibly resourceful. She managed to find blood plasma at the nearest hospital and had it airlifted over. Otherwise, the child wouldn't have survived. Oh, and at the beginning, that mother borrowed my phone to call someone for help, but the call was disconnected. Daniel was pale and staggered, unable to stand. It turned out that the phone call was her plea for help. She was begging him to save her son. And what was he doing? Playing with someone else's son. Sir, what's wrong? You don't look well. Would you like to get a checkup? The nurse asked with concern. The nurse's voice sounded muffled, as if through a barrier, and Daniel couldn't hear her at all. He dragged his stiff steps, looking utterly lost. Out of the hospital, he found Caroline and questioned her. What did Bonnie say on the phone that day? Caroline seemed a little guilty and pretended to have forgotten, saying, "Which day? Daniel, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" Daniel gripped her shoulder tightly, almost crushing it. He said in a calm voice, "Don't play dumb. It was the day of the parent-child activity, the day I took you swimming at the beach." "Oh, I told you she said Alexander was sick in a hospital and wanted you to go see him sick. She didn't say what was wrong. Was she sick or injured?" Daniel's eyes were bloodshot, his heart bleeding. Caroline was panicked. She had never seen Daniel like this before. She just wanted Bonnie to give up completely. Who knew it would have such serious consequences? George ran over and shoved him, yelling, "Let go of my mother. You're back." Daniel looked down at him. He doted on other men's wives and children while neglecting his own. Is there any man in the world as foolish as him? He shoved Caroline and their child aside and ran off to find his wife and son. He wanted to confess to them and beg them to come back. "Daniel, wait. Where are you going? You promised you wouldn't leave me and George." Caroline chased after him relentlessly. "Get out," Daniel roared. "Wah, you're a bad person. I hate you." George stomped his feet and burst into tears. Daniel looked at the two of them and felt nothing but utter disgust. Had he been blinded before? He had poured his heart out to them. However, the world is so big. Where are his wife and children? When he finally calmed down, he thought of his parents. They had always loved Bonnie very much, and they were sure they would find out about her. His father berated him mercilessly over the phone. "Daniel, you fool. Bonnie is such a good girl, and you treated her so badly, almost causing my grandson's death. Now you want me to clean up your mess? You'll drive me crazy sooner or later. Dad, I know I was wrong, but you must help me. I promise I'll treat them well from now on." Daniel could only grasp at this last straw. His mother quickly tried to smooth things over. All right, stop arguing. It would be best if they could be reunited on the weekend." I took Alexander out and saw Daniel standing at the door. I wasn't surprised, but he was a stranger to me now. Alexander clung tightly to me, his lips pursed. His little face was expressionless. In the past, he would have run to his father long ago. Daniel's voice was hoarse. "Bonnie, Alexander, it was all my fault in the past. Please forgive me. I'll come and take you home." I looked at him quietly for a long time before saying, "Daniel, we're over. If you still have even a little bit of feeling for me or for Alexander, please don't bother us." "No, Bonnie, I really know I was wrong. Please come home with us. I'll take good care of you. Please believe me one more time." Daniel stepped forward and said urgently, "Take care of us." I scoffed. "When Alexander desperately needed a blood transfusion, I begged you to save him. Where were you?" Daniel lowered his head in shame, and when he looked up again, his eyes were filled with tears. "I'm so sorry. I really didn't know at the time that Caroline said Alexander was just sick. I thought, please give me another chance. I will love you all for the rest of my life." I looked down at my son and said, "Alexander, do you forgive him?" Alexander pursed his lips and shook his head firmly. Alexander doesn't want a father anymore. A mother is enough for him. Daniel was stunned. He stepped forward, knelt down on one knee, grabbed his son's little hand, and said urgently, "Alexander, haven't you always wanted Daddy to be with you? Daddy promises you I will take good care of you. Come home with Daddy, okay?" Alexander said clearly, "I heard it with my own ears. You said you were George's father and that you loved him and his mother the most." Daniel's tall frame was speechless. "Alexander, let's go." I took his hand and walked past Daniel. "Wait a minute." Daniel grabbed me, his eyes red, and said, "Bonnie, at the parachute event that day, I just promised Caroline I'd make George happy. It was all a lie, even on the birthday cake, fake." I smiled calmly. "Daniel, you're an adult and should be responsible for your actions. Also, I have to tell you something. That night, when you took me back to my room, Daniel, you were sober." Cold sweat beaded on Daniel's forehead. He had taken me while he was fully conscious, so he told himself that I had tricked and schemed against him, and he couldn't forgive me. But actually, he couldn't forgive himself. Caroline knew I liked Daniel and that my parents were also keen to set us up, so she drugged me and hired thugs to ruin my reputation. But by a twist of fate, Daniel was right next to me when the drug took effect. Afterwards, a furious Caroline confronted the thug, only to be threatened with blackmail, who vowed to expose her actions. Caroline was terrified and had no choice but to reluctantly marry him. Later, the petty thug went to jail for fraud, and Caroline immediately divorced him and took advantage of Daniel's guilt to get involved with him. The thug was unwilling to give up, so he told me about this past. Only then did I understand why I had suddenly been overcome with emotion that night. I didn't want to dwell on it. All I wanted was to marry Daniel, but the truth could not be hidden forever. Daniel's face was deathly pale. The truth wasn't complicated. He could easily figure it out if he wanted to. I was wrong, terribly wrong, he muttered to himself. I took Alexander's hand and walked forward. Bonnie, Alexander, I was really wrong. Please forgive me. Daniel suddenly shouted, then knelt down with a thud. Give me another chance. Let me make it up to you, please. I paused, my heart aching, my eyes welling up. This was, after all, the man I had loved for 8 long years. How could I remain unmoved, seeing him in such a sorry state? But some things are destined to be irreversible, unforgivable. I looked at Alexander. His little face was exactly like Daniel's, yet it carried a seriousness that a 3-year-old shouldn't have. He shook his head gently but firmly. I smiled slightly, took his warm little hand, and walked further and further away. We heard suppressed sobs behind us, but we didn't turn back, and we never saw them again.